In this video, we'll look at the molecular geometry for AlCl3. This is aluminum chloride, sometimes called aluminum trichloride. The first thing we need when we look at the molecular geometry, we need to look at a Lewis structure. So if you drew the Lewis structure for AlCl3, you'd end up with something like this. Each chlorine atom, that would have 8 valence electrons, so those would have octets, but the aluminum in the center would only have 6. That's okay. Aluminum is an exception to the octet rule, so it's okay with 6. This is our Lewis structure. You can imagine the chlorine atoms, they're pushing away from each other. So when they do that, they'll spread out as far as they can. That'll give us our molecular geometry. That'll look like this. The central purple atom, that's the aluminum atom. We'll add 1 chlorine, 2. You see how they spread out, be as far away from each other as they can. We add the 3rd one, and we end up with what's called a trigonal planar molecular geometry. You can see it's all in one plane. Since we don't have any lone pairs, this is our molecular geometry. It's also the electron geometry for AlCl3. Let's go back to our Lewis structure. So if we weren't able to visualize that molecular geometry just by how these push apart from each other, there are 2 other ways we could do this. First, we could look at the steric number. We have 1, 2, 3 atoms and nothing else. So let's look at this table here. So our steric number is 3, and we don't have any lone pairs. So if we come over here, we see we have our trigonal planar molecular geometry. These bond angles here, they're going to be 120 degrees. So we have trigonal planar bond angles 120 degrees. You could also use the AXE notation. That's where we have A, that's the central atom, the aluminum. X, that's the number of other atoms bounded to it. We have 3 chlorine atoms. And E, that's the number of lone pairs. There aren't any, so sometimes you just see E0. So if we've memorized that AX3 is trigonal planar, or we're allowed to look it up on a table, there we go. That's our molecular geometry. This is Dr. B with the molecular geometry, bond angles, and electron geometry for AlCl3, aluminum chloride, sometimes called aluminum trichloride. Thanks for watching.